Hey, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jay Roxe. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at HYPR. And it's been an interesting couple of weeks because we've been able to be out at the Gartner IAM conference and at the FSISAC conference. And there's been a distinct change in tone in what we're hearing from people around authentication compared to even 7 months ago. We've moved from people being passwordless curious to a lot more people having funded passwordless projects and moving in that direction. It's a particularly interesting day for me to be meeting with this group because just this morning, HYPR released our third annual State of Passwordless Security. Clearly an annual report that we do. This year we talked to 1,000 IT decision makers and security decision makers around the world in the US, UK, Canada, France, Germany, Australia, Japan, and China. Of those, about 350 are in the financial services audience. So this becomes a very representative sample of the total move towards how authentication is being done today. Andrew and I are going to build on top of some of the same themes and some of the same data that we'll share. I think you'll find that this data is a couple of minutes old in terms of its overall relevancy. And one of the things that really jump out of the report is that 3 out of 5 of the organizations that we talked to, in other words, 60% of everybody on this call, would report an authentication-related breach over the past year. To put that in perspective, 75% of all organizations recorded some type of breach, and 80% of those breaches were actually due to authentication-related causes. It's an astounding number, and actually becomes even more significant when you realize that each of those organizations had nearly $3 million in costs associated with those breaches on a 12-month basis. Financial services was actually more highly attacked, unsurprisingly, than anybody else, with about 81% of financial services organizations having recorded some type of attack or breach. When we look at the data on where the attacks came from, look, talking about phishing or smishing or farming being the top attack vector is uninteresting. The Verizon data breach report has been saying that for more than 10 years at this point. The one that did jump out at us when we were looking at the data is where you're seeing the push notification attacks really start to take off. 28% doesn't sound like a huge number, but that's up more than 100% on a year-on-year basis. And some of that's being driven by the ease with which these attacks can now be executed. We see places online where people can purchase pre-built kits for a couple $100 a month that come with all of the templates that they need to run a phishing attack, or even attacker in the middle toolkits that make it much easier to execute these push notification attacks. The interesting part is for a couple $100 a month, you can buy the kit. For a few $100 a month more, you can buy 24/7 support. The attackers now have the same problems that every vendor has in terms of how do you maintain a support team and have a follow the sun methodology. It really is a game changer in terms of how much organizations are going to continue to see these attacks take place. But one of the reasons that all of the push bombing or MFA fatigue or other types of attacks have been so successful is because of the really poor user interface or experience that we've created with many of the technologies that are deployed today. I love looking at that picture on the right-hand side. For those of you that haven't seen one of these before, it's a mouse jiggler. And these got very common when we were all locked in at home, because all this does is make your computer think that the mouse is moving very rapidly back and forth. Useful to keep your machine from locking and forcing them to go through authentication again, or for making sure your boss feels that you're busy if they're running monitoring software on your machine. I mentioned this idea to a financial services CISO the other day, And she looked at me and said, that's Bush League. People have been doing this forever. When she wants to keep her machine from locking, all she does is start a video playing on her phone and put her mouse on top of it. In other words, if we make the experience bad enough, which we have, even the most security conscious among us are going to find ways around it. 86% of everybody we spoke with as a part of this survey feels that you have to go passwordless in order to achieve the user experience goals that every organization wants to have. And that builds into this idea that when we look at the reasons people are looking to adopt passwordless authentication, the top cited reason at 45% was people looking to improve the user experience. Even improving security posture came in behind that at nearly 43%. And it's easy to see why that's the case when you look at what we're asking people to do every day. Every employee is expected to go through 4 different authentication paths each day with an average of between 25 and 30 different logins. It's a really miserable experience, and it explains why 57% of organizations still use just a username and password across some of their key authentication flows. Until we nail this user experience, we're fundamentally not going to be any better off than we are today. And part of where we are today is we as a group, everybody on this meeting, us as an industry, have an education mission that we need to take on. Almost everybody thinks that the current solution is partly or mostly secure. And clearly that is belied by all of the information we've talked about over the past couple of minutes. It's not. And yet even the people who acknowledged a breach, 58% of them chose to make no change in response to having been breached. And part of that, I think, is understanding that there are even changes that they should be making. When we talk to people who claim that they're using phishing resistant MFA based on the FIDO standard, based on the CISA recommendations, only about 3% of them actually are. In other words, there's a huge misunderstanding around what phishing resistant MFA even requires of an organization, and therefore of the benefits that it provides. Andrew mentioned the idea in his presentation of where passkeys fit into the overall ecosystem. I think we're all excited about passkeys. They're going to be revolutionary in terms of the user experience and in terms of consumer adoption of a better authentication, a better login experience. And that helps to address one of the primary challenges that an enterprise will face. At the end of the day, the 2 scariest words for any enterprise leader are change and management. So getting that experience of people using passkeys at home is going to make that change management challenge all that much easier. But many of the enterprises won't necessarily want to use a shareable passkey, and will be looking for a device-bound passkey or a single instance passkey where they can control the experience end to end. You'll also need passkeys to integrate in with the infrastructure that you already have, which is one of the reasons we're excited that about 2 weeks ago, HYPR announced HYPR Enterprise Passkeys for Microsoft Azure. This is a solution that was certified by Microsoft to be as secure as the standards that have traditionally applied to hardware keys. In other words, it turns your phone into a FIDO token and gives organizations the choice of having something that's secure as hardware, while integrating with a software-based ecosystem and really giving people a choice on deployment models and how they want to take people down that journey towards passwordless. So the combination of costs, user experience, the changes in the attack landscape, and the rise of passkeys are going to be the fundamental drivers that it will take to retire the password. The password started its career 62 years ago at MIT, where it was just designed to control access to a time-sharing system. And it's had a long and miserable career where we should finally allow it to retire. And I think there are three things that are going to be key in driving that retirement. The first is building your roadmap based on proven success. And that means picking the use cases that you're going to address first, but also looking at ways that you can learn from previous experiences. We've rolled out 80,000 customers at some of the largest financial services institutions over the past quarter, and building on a track record of success of having done that previously. And there are a lot of learnings that come from deploying at that type of scale. It's incumbent on this group to be the evangelists, to drive out this awareness that there is a better way to improve the way the world is logging in, to fix that experience. And finally, the key to all of this is understanding that the users will continue to evade anything that is not improving their overall user experience and making their lives better. So building your roadmap based on proven success, evangelizing the benefits of passkeys and of phishing resistant MFA, and continuing to remain obsessed about that user experience are the things that are going to move us all forward together. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation today. And I'd invite everybody to go check out the findings in the State of Passwordless report that we published this morning.
Thank you, Jay. That was a great presentation. And again, it just was a happy coincidence that HYPR's State of Passwordless report actually came out this morning, right? So please do go check that out. It's always a great report every year, really great data in there. So thanks again, Jay. And we're going to jump into a quick break for about 20 minutes. So please do meet us back here at 2 p.m. Eastern, where we're going to dive into Passkeys 101. See you then.